Hello everyone, welcome back to ASR, African Stories Realized. We recently wrapped up a full recap of Netflix's South African drama series, The Polygamist. The first season captivated audiences around the world with its wild twists and Jonasi Gomora's dark secrets. But as many of you know, before it was a hit series, The Polygamist started its life as a celebrated 2012 novel by Zimbabwean author Sue Nyathi. As promised, today we're comparing the novel with the Netflix adaptation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Both versions follow the wealthy and charismatic Jonasi Gomora, but how they tell the story is different. In the original novel, the story is firmly rooted in Zimbabwe. Jonasi Gomora is a high-flying tech and banking tycoon operating his business J&J Holdings in Harare. The story explores the wealthy suburbs of Folian Crescent and Borrowdale and the humble townships of Highfields and Warren Park. For the Netflix adaptation, Stainless Glass Productions moved the primary setting to South Africa. Jonasi's empire operates in Johannesburg and the township roots shift to Soweto. However, the show gives a beautiful nod to the source material in episode 5 when Jonasi and Joyce go on a romantic getaway to rekindle their marriage when they travel to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. In the book, Jonasi takes Joyce on a Mediterranean cruise for their anniversary. The book also revolves around Joyce and Jonasi's 17th anniversary rather than their 20th anniversary like in the show. While Jonasi, Joyce, Matipa, Essie, Sarah, and Freedom's names remain unchanged, Menzi and Mpume's names were changed from Gadigai and Rudo respectively. I'll just refer to them as Menzi and Mpume for convenience and so I don't confuse anyone. The reason I think Netflix changed the name of Jonasi's son to Menzi was to honor the 1972 book also called The Polygamist, written by Ndabaningi Sithole. The name of the polygamist in that book is Menzi, which is why I believe Netflix will continue the second season with Menzi embarking on a life of polygamy. However, I'm not sure how much they'll adapt from the 1972 book. I've only read a few pages and the story is a bit outdated, but then again they did well to modernize season 1 of The Polygamist. I also think it might have given some inspiration to Sue Nyathi's book, with both authors being from Zimbabwe, but that's just a theory on my part. While the show tells Jonasi's story from the perspective of his 3 wives and mistress, in the book, Jonasi's perspective is also included to that of the 4 women. The book's prologue describes the wives viewing Jonasi's dry, lifeless face in a mahogany casket, very much what we see in the very first scene, minus Joyce's dramatic entrance. In the book, Jonasi's first wife Joyce comes from Zimbabwean political royalty. Her father is a ZANU-PF cabinet minister from Masvingo, who wielded significant political influence that affected Jonasi's success. He didn't really give him handouts, and in fact Jonasi rejected a job offer from him. In the show, Joyce's political connections are still there when she uses the minister's wife to threaten Jonasi's tender, ultimately forcing Jonasi to attend their anniversary. She does this in the book as well, reminding Jonasi that the Minister of Finance would be attending their anniversary party, implying that his presence was necessary for Jonasi to avoid losing his banking license. The show also had a throwaway line about Joyce's father, but I think they should have used that a bit more to explain her motivations, her conduct, and influence outside of Jonasi. In the book, Joyce has 4 children rather than 3, but the narrative mainly focuses on the 2 older children, much like in the show. Mpume is Joyce's second child and only daughter. Growing up in a household fractured by Jonasi's infidelity, she turns to religion as a form of escape, becoming a God-fearing woman who eventually marries a man named Trevor. A lot of things that happened during the twins' christening in the show actually took place during Mpume's 21st birthday in the book. So you can see that they really switched her up. Instead of being defined by religion, in the show she's an aspiring student who eventually becomes a psychologist. Shumi in the book is still the youngest son, and he was born on the day J&J Holdings went public. He's often the subject of custody disputes, with Joyce even dumping the children on Matipa for weekends to stress her out. In the show, Jonasi's affair with Matipa started on the day Shumi was born. J&J were having an event that day, so maybe they were celebrating the company going public in the show as well. In the book, Joyce first began to suspect Jonasi of cheating following Shumi's first birthday. Jonasi had been absent for the cake cutting and arrived home after midnight. When he finally climbed into bed, Joyce noticed the scent of another woman's perfume on Jonasi's body and became more suspicious when he started sleeping in the spare bedroom. In the novel, Joyce's discovery of Jonasi's affair with Matipa happened by chance at a designer boutique. While in the changing room, Joyce overheard two women in the adjacent cubicle talking loudly about Janasi. One of the women, who she later realized was Matipa, was bragging about an outfit for Janasi and mocking Joyce. Joyce assaulted Matipa in the store, similarly to how she beat her up in episode 2 after discovering the affair with Matipa, cornering her in a salon before unleashing an assault on her. And Janasi does confront her about it in the book, word for word like he did in the show. The accidental fire that Joyce started at the end of episode 1, however, did not occur in the book. The novel includes an additional child for Janasi and Joyce, who wasn't adapted in the series. Tino Tenda, or Tino, was the oldest son who was born when Janasi was still in university. Janasi actually had to drop out of university to support Joyce and the baby. That's when his father-in-law offers him a job like I mentioned earlier. Tino is Joyce's most loyal ally, refusing to visit his father's mistresses and eventually moving to London to study economics and support his mother. I can already see how the show could work him into a possible second season, but of course he wouldn't be Joyce's son in the adaptation. Knowing Janasi, he probably had another family hidden away somewhere. In the show, Joyce finds out about Janasi's affair with Lindani after she discovered the couple canoodling in her home following Lindani's miscarriage, unleashing an assault on both of them with her belt. In the novel, there's no such dramatic discovery. Instead, Lindani is just presented as Janasi's latest acquisition. At their daughter's 21st birthday celebration, Janasi arrived with Lindani as his +1, causing significant embarrassment for his daughter and her fiancé. Joyce recalls trying to figure out who was older, her daughter or Janasi's new mistress. By the time Lindani became involved with Janasi, Joyce was already aware of his other wives. In the show, Joyce was the one who dropped out of university, but by the end she finally graduated and even wrote a book. The novel gives Joyce a similar redemption arc as she shifts focus to her own self-improvement, returning to school to study for her A-levels and eventually pursuing a career in accounting at one of the biggest firms in Zimbabwe. The show is set in modern times, spanning from the late 90s when Janasi and Essie met to the 2020s. Whereas in the book, Janasi married his second wife Essie in 1991, which means the story spans from the 80s to the 2000s. And since Sue Nyathi's book came out in 2012, I think that makes sense. Unlike in the show where Essie is friends with Joyce and attends Gomorrah family events, in the novel, she's Janasi's long-standing secret. She lives in the township and stays out of the high life. Freedom's father in the book was a soldier who died at war rather than Essie's gangster ex-boyfriend who was depicted in the show. In the book, Essie had 3 children, 2 of whom were fathered by Janasi. The other was a son named Blessing, who the show decided not to include in the adaptation. In the show, Essie met Joyce shortly after her marriage to Janasi, while both women were pregnant with their respective daughters. But in the novel, Joyce and Essie met on several occasions, but for many years, Joyce was unaware of Essie's true identity as Janasi's second wife. She even attended Janasi's 40th birthday, but Joyce dismissed her as one of Janasi's poor family members. However, Janasi's family, including his brothers, knew about her. Janasi didn't have 1 but 3 brothers, neither of whom was named Magesh. And while they were aware of Essie, they had their own wives. There was no storyline with either one of them pretending to be Essie's husband. Janasi was the youngest of the 4 boys. His older brothers were named Cosmos, Gershom, and Wanda, who I think the show just combined into one character to create Magesh. Or maybe there is an uncle we might see in a later season. The book describes Janasi's brothers as weather-beaten men who often relied on Janasi for financial bailouts and were known for bullying him when they were children. The show did allude to Janasi getting bullied when he was younger, but it didn't indicate his brother's involvement. In fact, it seemed more like he was the one bullying Magesh in the show. In the book, Essie was also a hairdresser, and she did help finance Janasi's education before he returned years later to propose to her, much like in the show. The character of Sarah undergoes some significant transformations from novel to the screen. Much like in the show, she has always known that Janasi was her father, but the book reveals that she was even named after Janasi's late mother. In the show, she's even more volatile and a resentful character with a desperate desire to be publicly acknowledged by Janasi. She even goes as far as seducing her cousin Mpume's boyfriend during the twins' christening. In the novel, Sarah's a devoted daughter to Janasi and relatively quiet and drama-free. Her biggest scandal is having a white boyfriend, the son of a German ambassador, a relationship that Essie encourages as it could potentially get them out of the township. In the book, Janasi performs a balancing act to ensure that Sarah is well educated, sending both his daughters to elite schools. This is a huge contrast to the show where Sarah is neglected by her father, even resorting to stealing her cousin's iPhone. In both the novel and the series, the discovery of an STI plays a big part, especially for Essie, who was hit the hardest. She was initially diagnosed with TB, but Essie believed her condition was spiritual, suspecting that Joyce was attacking her through witchcraft. Her condition deteriorated until she was eventually admitted to the hospital in a critical state. Her daughter Sarah called Joyce for help, who visited the hospital and was shocked to see Essie's thinned down appearance. The book strongly suggests that she also had HIV. Essie later recalled that Joyce visited her many times during her recovery. However, after Joyce confessed to Joyce that Essie was actually his second wife and the mother of his 2 children, a vengeful Joyce returned to the hospital and assaulted Essie, screaming at the frail, ailing woman. This was one of the biggest departures from the book, but you can see which parts this show adapted to create the dynamic between the 2 wives. Joyce also found out while Essie was in the hospital, but that was because Sarah had accidentally pushed her down the stairs before spilling the beans to Joyce. The book introduces Joyce's 3rd wife, Matipa, as a high-flying legal eagle who meets Joyce during a corporate interview, ultimately earning a promotion after their affair begins. In the show, she was already working for J&J's legal department and was initially dating Joyce's brother Magesh before moving on to the CEO and getting promoted. There was initially a lot of talk online about Matipa's appearance in the show and her not being described as attractive in the novel, but whether Matipa is considered ugly depends on which character is describing her in the book. She's described by Joyce as an unconventional beauty with a complexion dark as a blueberry. Initially, Joyce describes Matipa as a repulsive Rapunzel with a long mane of fake hair. She later mentions that Matipa wasn't even pretty, but conceded that she had a great body. However, Joyce's opinion shifts during her 17th anniversary party, where she admits that Matipa looked amazing in her figure-hugging dress, which was well depicted in the show when Matipa made a dramatic entrance during the anniversary party. Now, Essie offers the harshest critique, calling Matipa the ugliest thing she had ever seen. She also compares Matipa's thin frame to a Somalian war victim and claims her long weave made her look like a witch, even speculating that Matipa must have used muti to make Joyce like her because she found her so physically unattractive. This is when I realized that Essie is a hater in the novel, and I think a bit of that side was shown in the series because she was always preying on Joyce's downfall. Matipa definitely didn't lack confidence. In both the novel and the series, she intentionally uses other men to make Joyce jealous. In the Netflix adaptation, Matipa decided to make Joyce jealous by hooking up with the minister who had previously granted Joyce a business tender. Joyce spotted Matipa and the minister out for dinner and confronted her directly, questioning if they were sleeping together. In the novel, Matipa's attempts to make Joyce jealous begins during the Gomora's anniversary party. After crashing the event and feeling slighted because Joyce's attention was focused on Joyce, she began flirting with Comrade Sue, a politician and ambassador to China. Her plan escalated after she discovered that Joyce had taken Joyce on a Mediterranean cruise for their anniversary. In retaliation, she accepted a trip to China and contacted Comrade Sue before joining him on a 3-week trip to China. Upon returning to Harare, Joyce went crazy and confronted her in his office, demanding to know where she had been. However, Matipa demanded that Joyce take her as a second wife. Joyce agreed immediately, and the same weekend, him and his brothers negotiated the lobola with Matipa's father. Joyce was not involved in this decision. She actually believed that Joyce had ended the affair until she discovered Matipa and the newborn twins in the hospital much later. The show flips this on its head, with the twins' birth coming before Joyce's marriage to Matipa, and Joyce proposing the marital arrangement after finding out about the twins at the hospital, similarly to how it plays out in the book. The only difference is I think in the book, she actually went through with getting her tubes tied. So she was there for a few days and then Matipa came in to give birth and then it played out the same way it played out in the show, with the doctor revealing that there was another Gomora woman in the maternity ward. In both the novel and the series, Matipa makes the initial discovery of an STI during a gynecology appointment. However, the book specifies that she made the appointment because she was experiencing some symptoms. In the novel, Joyce assaulted Matipa after she suggested he use protection. He later does the same to Joyce after she refused to sleep with him because of the STI. She even went to greater lengths to protect herself from any infection. This is similar to the series where Joyce assaulted the 2 wives on the same day. However, there were other contributing factors to the assault, like Matipa stealing money from their joint account. Following Jonasi's assault in the series, Matipa abandons her twin daughters and leaves a note behind asking Joyce to care for them before driving away to rebuild their life. It plays out similarly in the book with some minor differences. Matipa dropped the twins off at Joyce's home and never returned to pick them up, also leaving a brief note for Joyce asking her to look after her girls. She fled with only a few clothes and some jewelry, leaving her cars behind and eventually moving to the United Kingdom, where she stayed for 5 years without returning for her children. Matipa only returned to Zimbabwe after reading about Jonasi's death in an obituary, but when she finally saw her daughters again at the funeral, she was heartbroken to find that there was not even a flicker of recognition in their eyes. Matipa tried to re-establish a bond with the twins, but they refused to acknowledge her as their mother, explicitly telling her new husband that Joyce was their mother. I like this context from the book, and I think the show really spared Matipa there. They should have thrown in some of these lines, but the scene with the twins just ignoring her at the end and not recognizing her, I think that was well depicted and adapted from the text. In the book, Lindani is introduced as a young woman Jonasi meets by chance in a crowded nightclub at 2 a.m. She has no prior connection to the family and is portrayed as a first-class hoe with multiple boyfriends simultaneously to fund her lifestyle. I apologize for the language, but I was just quoting the novel. Those are not my words. I will say that Sue Nyathi does not hold back. She's pretty straight to the point. There's some strong language in this book, but we'll talk about that later. In the show, her character is much more integrated into the Gomora family. She's the best friend of Jonasi's daughter and the primary romantic interest of her son Menzi, whereas in the book, she's simply just another mistress. In the book, Lindani becomes pregnant by her younger boyfriend, Farai, but intentionally lies to Jonasi, claiming the baby is his to secure her financial future. She later suffers a miscarriage in her 7th month, whereas in the show, Lindani becomes pregnant after a trip to Durban with Jonasi. Her boyfriend, Golani, breaks up with her because he suspects the child is not his. She suffers a miscarriage shortly after, and ironically, Joyce and Mpume support her at the hospital before finding out that Jonasi is the father. In the show, Menzi has a long-standing crush on Lindani, and while he was initially devastated to discover his father's affair with her, the series ends with Menzi and Lindani hooking up during Jonasi's funeral. The couple also hooked up in the book, but it happened while Jonasi was alive. During Mpume's 21st birthday party, Lindani slipped away from the guests and found Menzi lying topless on the couch. After a brief conversation, they became intimate, and Jonasi actually catches them together, but didn't confront them. At this point, he was already sick and didn't really care about Lindani. Jonasi later reflects in the epilogue that Lindani was sleeping with men inside his house while he was dying in the next room, which the show technically did adapt with Lindani bringing men home while he was bedridden. In the show, Lindani gate-crashed Joyce's book launch with a sick wheelchair-bound Jonasi, announcing that she was done taking care of him. However, in the novel, it was actually Lindani who called Joyce, begging her to take Jonasi back. Following a period where Jonasi had been living with Lindani in Matipa's old house, Lindani contacted Joyce to confess that she couldn't cope with nursing a dying Jonasi through his illness. While in the show, Lindani was just a mistress, there are some suggestions in the novel that the couple actually got married, with her referring to Jonasi multiple times as her husband, and Joyce does confirm in the opening of the book that there were 4 wives. Lindani also identified herself as a young, vulnerable widow, so that suggests that they were married. But like I said, it's a bit ambiguous. Jonasi's final birthday is used both in the book and the show as a moment of closure. In the book, Jonasi celebrates his 46th birthday at Joyce's home with all his children from different wives, including Sarah and Blessing. Jonasi dies in Joyce's arms that very night, turning the celebration into a final goodbye. In the show, Sarah was not present at Jonasi's final birthday, and like I suggested in the recap, it likely wasn't even his real birthday. The family celebrated it early because they knew he wouldn't survive to see the actual date. Much like in the book, Jonasi dies overnight after this final celebration. In the show, Jonasi's death is a murder plot orchestrated by Joyce. In the stunning finale of episode 22, it's revealed that Joyce hired a woman she met in prison to deliberately seduce Jonasi and infect him with HIV. In the book, Jonasi's death is a slow, tragic result of his own choices. He contracts HIV through his various affairs. He refuses to take ARVs, claiming that only fools get HIV. This is very similar to the show where we saw Jonasi refusing to take his medication. I really like the twist they added to the series, and the execution with Joyce hiring the girl she met in jail was flawless. I didn't notice it was her who seduced Joyce, and I really thought she was just an oversharing cellmate in the beginning. It registered, but I think I heard her, but I didn't want to listen to the story she was telling because I thought it was just filler. They did really well to hide her until the big reveal at the end. I usually pick things like this up, so yeah, I was very surprised that I didn't catch that. Following Joyce's death in the book, Joyce and Essie met in a highly public and volatile encounter at their husband's funeral. Essie charged into the service, demanding recognition, which resulted in a 10-minute verbal altercation between her and Joyce in front of the other mourners. I think the show was smart using this conflict in the book to create the drama of the two funerals in the finale, with Joyce confronting Essie for stealing Joyce's body and conducting her own service. Then with Essie and Sarah gatecrashing the real funeral service despite being banned from attending by Joyce. In a final confrontation at Joyce's wake, Matipa and Essie debated the source of the virus that led to his demise. Essie blamed Lindani for giving him HIV, while Matipa speculated that Joyce might also be positive. However, Joyce's mother intervened, insisting that her daughter did not have the virus. In the show, Joyce leaves his entire estate to his son Menzi after Menzi and Joyce manipulated the dying Joyce into changing his will in Menzi's favor. In the book, however, Joyce's business empire, J&J Holdings, collapses and is unbundled due to the economic decline in Zimbabwe. Joyce died without a will, and the inheritance for each wife was determined more by what they had secured before his death, rather than a formal distribution of assets. In his epilogue, Joyce admits that by the time he died, he had nothing left to give, and whoever hadn't squeezed him while he was alive was out of luck. However, Joyce did reveal that he had entrusted Joyce with offshore funds before he died, and she also retained the family home. Matipa held deeds to 2 properties in the suburbs, which Joyce had given her as a wedding present years earlier. Essie was not as fortunate. Joyce stopped supporting her financially towards the end of his life, leaving her so poor that she had to shove lamb chops into a handbag at Joyce's wake. Joyce left Lindani with nothing, and she was forced to return to the streets. The book leaves her facing eviction by Matipa and hunting for targets among the mourners at Joyce's funeral to maintain her lifestyle. I think The Polygamist was a faithful adaptation to the source material. They modernized the story and gave it a new life. While it was set in a different location, they did well to capture what Sue Nyathi had written on the page. Even the intimate scenes were as graphic and unexpected as they appeared on the page. At times it felt like I was reading a graphic romance novel. And much like the intimate scenes in the show, they would just pop up like jump scares on the page, which I think is a sign of good writing. The cast in the show also complemented their characters in the book, which is not easy, and having watched this show doesn't spoil the book at all. They have so many parallels but still distinct from each other, so I highly recommend it. I hope they're already working on a season 2. I expect them to continue with Menzi, but like I mentioned in the recap, there's also a lot of potential for an anthology series that tells a different polygamist story every season. If they do continue with the Gomorrah family, I think Joyce's presence can still be felt through flashbacks as new characters are introduced from his perspective. Oh, and there's this symbolism of the eagle and the fish that Netflix was pushing in the title card for the show, and I honestly don't get it. In the book, Joyce frequently refers to Matipa as his legal eagle, which is just a pet name based on her professional background, and Lindani describes Joyce as a big fish that she couldn't afford to let get away. In the show, we see Joyce's friend use the analogy referring to Joyce as an eagle flying high, questioning how she could have got with a fish like Joyce, suggesting that they're completely different. I mean, they tried to give it some meaning, but I still don't get it. I just wanted to highlight any meaning there might be behind that symbolism. That's what I found. So if you guys have a different interpretation, please let me know. It was a pleasure reviewing the show and book with you guys. Get in the comments if you've also read the book and let me know if I left anything out. This took a bit longer than expected, but I just wanted to be thorough. Finally, we've reached 50,000 subs, and I just want to say thank you to all the subscribers. I really appreciate your support. This is ASR for the love of African filmmaking and storytelling.